1/3 of stroke survivors will have speech and communication issues like aphasia, dysarthria, and apraxia. Let me explain what these issues are, and I'm going to give you 8 simple tips to help you talk with someone who has speech issues. And if you're a stroke survivor who has these issues, please feel free to share this video to help educate others. If you'd like to see more about aphasia, please leave me a comment down below and let me know what topics you'd like to see covered. Let's get into it. Aphasia is a communication disorder that impacts your ability to produce speech as well as comprehend speech, and it may also affect reading and writing. It's due to some type of injury to the brain, like after a stroke, or even due to slow-growing brain tumors. The most common types of aphasia include non-fluent aphasia, also called Broca's aphasia, because it affects the Broca's area of language in the brain. Now, people with Broca's aphasia typically understand speech and know what they want to say, but they have a lot of trouble getting the words out. For example, they may want to say, "I need to take the dog for a walk," but only be able to say, "dog walk." And because they can understand the speech of others, it can become really frustrating when they can't get out what they want to say. The second most common type of aphasia is fluent aphasia, also known as Wernicke's aphasia, because of the area of the brain that it affects. Now, this type of aphasia is where someone is capable of producing speech, but it might be really jumbled or not make a lot of sense. They also have trouble comprehending the speech of others. And another symptom that makes this type of aphasia hard to treat is they don't always recognize that they're not speaking with understandable language. And the last most common type of aphasia is global aphasia. This is sort of a mixture of both fluent and non-fluent aphasia, and it can be very difficult to treat. This is where someone has both trouble producing speech as well as understanding speech. It results from extensive damage to the language areas of the brain, and it can cause severe communication difficulties. People with this type of aphasia may only be able to repeat a few words or say certain words over and over again. In addition to aphasia, dysarthria is another condition that impacts speech after a stroke, and it has to do with weakness and difficulty controlling the muscles that help to produce speech. So for someone with dysarthria, it might take them longer to get their words out, and when they do, their speech may seem slurred or garbled. They have a difficult time articulating words. Lastly, apraxia of speech is where someone has trouble planning and coordinating movements of the mouth in order to produce speech. And this results from the breakdown in communication between the brain and the body as a result of the stroke. Now that we understand the most common types of speech and communication disorders, let's jump into the 8 tips that can help you communicate with someone who might have one of these issues. The first tip is to ask yes/no questions. Depending on the severity of the speech disorder that your loved one might have, asking yes/no questions can be a great way for you to be able to communicate with each other and for them to be able to tell you what they need. Now, the thing is, your loved one needs to be able to accurately and reliably tell you yes/no so that you're not asking questions and getting an incorrect response. This is probably best worked out with a speech therapist. Number 2, speak slowly but naturally. You can still have a natural conversational cadence like I'm showing you here, but you don't have to speak super quickly. You can add in all sorts of inflections like you would normally do in your natural speech pattern. You don't have to talk like this to make sure that someone understands you. But it can be a bit offensive when you talk to somebody like that because you have to recognize not everybody with a speech disorder also has cognitive or intellectual issues. They also might not even have comprehension issues. So speak in your natural voice, but maybe just try to speak a little more slowly. Number 3, don't interrupt. People who have speech and communication issues often take a little longer to produce their speech, to get their words out. And it can feel a little bit awkward because in typical conversation, we have sort of this give and take, this back and forth, and it usually just flows simply. But this isn't the case with somebody who has a communication issue. It can feel awkward. It can feel like you're kind of just waiting for them to get their words out and you might want to rush them along, but don't. This is incredibly frustrating. Allow them the time and the space to say what they need to say. Tip number 4, don't finish their sentences. Often you are not going to guess correctly what they're trying to say, And this is going to be incredibly frustrating for them. Allow them, again, to have the space to say what they're trying to say. And even though it might feel a little awkward for you to sit there and wait for them to say the words, you are giving them a lot more dignity by allowing them to express themselves. Number 5, use communication boards and apps. For some survivors with speech issues, especially early on, using communication boards where they can point to what they need, whether it's yes, no, maybe it's a picture of a toilet if they need to go to the bathroom or food. This can be a very helpful way to communicate with a loved one who has got this issue. Number 6, don't talk down to them. Just like with my example where I spoke very loudly and slowly, don't speak to them like they're a child that you're disciplining or that they are dumb. Again, you are significantly reducing their dignity by talking to them in that way. That natural conversational style of talking can be very helpful, where you're still using the same inflections, but you're just slowing down your speech a little bit to make sure that they understand you. Number 7, encourage gestures and pointing. For some survivors, using gestures, like if they need to brush their hair or get dressed, if they're hungry, using pointing for something that they're trying to show you, encourage those things. It can be frustrating day after day to know what you want to say and not be able to produce the speech to say it. So if somebody can gesture or point and still get their point across, that can be really helpful and help to ease some stress on the survivor. And lastly, advocate for your loved one to get speech therapy. I know that this isn't always easy, and especially if you live in the United States, it can feel like a fight with insurance to get them to cover those visits, but go to bat for your loved one. Fight those insurance companies. Reach out and say, no, this is medically necessary. Talk with your loved one's doctor or neurologist and let them know that this is really important. And again, if you are in the United States, remember that your therapy visits start over at the beginning of each year. So if you use up all your visits for 1 year, at the beginning of the new year, ask your doctor for a new referral. A speech therapist is going to help you or a loved one get individualized treatment based on the specific issues that you're having, and this can be really invaluable. If you only have a certain amount of visits, ask them, the therapist, to give you homework and to give you therapy progressions that you can continue to do at home even after you've been discharged. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you're looking for ways to support post-stroke, the easiest ways are to click that join button to learn more about a channel membership, as well as to click that super thanks down in the YouTube bar below. A huge thank you to all of the donors who make videos like this possible, with a special thanks to Heather G, Ryan D, and Modus Nova in our Empowerer tier. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.